adjourn and give the call to the honourable member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Speaker. Much like the member for Hasluck, I too wish to congratulate the Minister for Climate Change and Energy for the successful passage of the Safeguard Mechanism Amendment Bill through this House. This is such an important step towards reaching net zero by 2050 and also the legislated 43% emissions reduction by 2030, ensuring our economy is ready to take advantage of the opportunities that these legislation will present, and also to mitigate the impacts of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions on our environment. The Safeguard Mechanism will ensure the nation's highest emitters deliver a proportional share of the national 2030 target, encouraging these facilities and forcing these facilities to reduce their emissions and invest in clean energy technologies. It will deliver 205 million tonnes of emissions reductions by 2030. That's equal to taking 2/3 of Australia's cars off the road, and it will aggregate emissions reductions from 153 million tonnes this year down to just 100 million tonnes in 2030. The changes this bill will bring are essential if we are to meet our commitments under the Paris Agreement and do our part as a global citizen to mitigate the impacts of climate change, because we cannot afford to idly sit by and ignore the growing threat of climate change here in Australia and across the world. After a decade of climate inaction and negligence and denial by those opposite, this bill represents a responsible and desperately needed response to the genuine threat of climate change, and it's what those in my electorate of Bennelong voted for, Mr Speaker. The Liberals and Nationals have repeatedly shown themselves to be completely out of touch on climate action and the environment. They're out of touch with all the businesses who are also taking action on climate change, and they're out of touch with everyday Australians who in May last year voted for strong climate action. And stunningly, Mr Speaker, they continue to deny, delay and create chaos regarding the government here who wishes to take climate action. Those opposite consistently oppose meaningful action on climate change, choosing instead to prioritise the interests of our biggest polluters and fringe climate deniers over the health and well-being of our planet. And we see again and again the Liberals and Nationals' refusal to support climate action here in this House, voting against not only our 43% legislated target brought to this place last year, but also the Safeguard Mechanism here a few days ago. But this government will not let their short-sightedness and lack of vision hold us back. We must continue to take bold action on climate change, and this bill is an essential step in that direction. In contrast to those opposite, I commend the efforts of the crossbench to work collaboratively to secure the passage of this critical legislation through this place. It is testament to the strength of our democracy that we can work together in this place to achieve meaningful outcomes for Australia. The opposition could learn a lot from the crossbench instead of consistently dealing themselves out of legislation and making themselves irrelevant. This government recognises the importance of working with everyone in parliament and engaging in a constructive and respectful dialogue while considering the concerns and priorities of all parties involved. This approach allows the government to make improvements and adjustments to our proposed legislation. It's important. It's how this place is meant to work, and it's how parliament will work as long as Labor continues to form government. I urge those in the Senate to work collaboratively to get this bill through the parliament. Failure to pass this critical legislation this week will not only cause us to miss our 2030 emissions target, but could set back the target even further. The reforms were a vital component of the Powering Australia plan announced 15 months ago, which was endorsed by the Australian people at the election. It is crucial that we act on the commitments we have made and implement these reforms so that they can start from 1 July 2023. The parliament cannot afford to make the same mistakes of the past and lose another decade of reasonable and considered climate action. We must seize this opportunity and take decisive action on climate change. It's what Bennelong voted for, it's what Australia voted for, and the time is now.
The House stands adjourned until 8 a.m.